Well, good evening, folks. It is Tuesday, October 10th, 2023. It's 6 o'clock and we are in the council chambers at in the city of Platteville, and I'm calling the regular meeting of the Common Council to order. Candace will start with roll call.
Jason Arts.
Here.
Lynn Parrott.
Here.
Todd Casper.
Here.
Bob Gates.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Barbara Doss.
Here.
Kathy Kopp.
Here.
Okay, on our consideration for the consent agenda tonight, we have council minutes from September 26th, the regular meeting, and the special meeting we had for the CIP on October 3rd, payment of bills, the financial report from September, appointments to boards and commissions, and tonight I'm appointing James Berglund to the Airport Commission effective November 1, 2023. And licenses, as were in your packet, for 1- and 2-year operator licenses to serve and sell alcohol. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ken and a second by Lynn to approve the consent agenda as presented. Candace will vote.
Arts.
Yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Casper.
Yes.
Gates.
Yes.
Killian.
Yes.
Doss.
Yes.
Kopp.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next on our agenda is citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any. And I would say that all of the green sheets that I have received, and if you want to speak tonight, you need to have filed a green sheet. All of them pertain to an agenda item, so there are no citizens' comments, observations, and petitions from citizens. I would point out that this is the week of Platteville High School's homecoming. And that there is a homecoming parade. Lynn, is that correct?
Yes,
On Friday?
yes, and I wanted to talk about them and their winning streak. I wanted to give a shout out to the Hillman High School, Platteville High School football team. They are 7-1, and we should all be so proud of them. They have a chance to go into the championship. Their game is going to be this. The game is Friday, and their homecoming party is going to be Saturday, which I'm going to be chaperoning. Yes,
Oh, you're gonna be the chef.
yes, make sure they
Okay.
do the right thing.
All right. Evidently, that's part of being,
But I'm so
is that part
excited.
of being on the city council, or is that just part of being at the high school, Lynn?
Both of them.
I see, okay.
I wear the tags. Yeah.
All right, I would also say that congratulations will be in order for our Platteville Public Schools as they intend to open their athletic complex this weekend. And Hillman will be playing for the first time on the fields in north of the high school. So congratulations to Mr. Babel and his team, and to let's see, Point of Beginning, I believe, is their general contractor. All right, any other comments or petitions? I do thank everyone who turned out on Sunday afternoon for our second annual Taste of Platteville. I have spoken to folks who were there and who assisted in its organization, and it was very well attended.
We sold just under 2,000 tickets.
Okay. Yeah, and a ticket was $1, so that would be $2,000 worth. So that was very good, and I can tell you from a personal situation that the food was pretty good. There we go. All right, any other upcoming things other than the museum continuing its pasty drive? So for sales of pasties, etc. Okay, and you can do that online. Reports in the packet tonight were Plan Commission. Todd, anything?
Nothing further.
Okay, neither from me. Water and Sewer, Ken or Kathy?
No addition.
Okay, Historic Preservation Commission, Ken?
No addition.
Library Board, Lynn?
No additions, no addition.
No additions. Other reports in the packet, the Water and Sewer Financial Report for September. The Airport Financial Report for September. The Task Force for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity update. And I understand that our own council member Lynn has been selected to chair that now. And finally, finally, the Task Force for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity update. And I understand that our own council member Lynn has been selected to chair that now. And finally, 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 We'll get back to it.
Department progress.
Department progress reports.
Okay,
Ken?
I did have a question about the task force. Is that gonna come up later? You mentioned some different dates there. Is that gonna come up later as something to add to the code book? I mean, last time I think you had three basic things you wanted us to look at, and you had a write-up as far as the code edition, the code wording.
We did the last action we had was a resolution to kind of amend their charter resolution, which established that body. With that, we're asking them to bring forward recommendations that they think are good on behalf of the city as an organization, how we impact services, and how we have community engagements. Some of those may arrive at an ordinance. I don't know yet. We haven't worked out with that group yet on what recommendations that they want to bring forward for the city to consider. Does that answer your question?
In part. The other question I have is, I thought eventually it's going to be changed from a task force to something else, whether it be a committee or a commission.
That is another potential, and that is kind of, again, that I'm hoping that force can bring forward as a recommendation on what a body may look like and what it might be comprised of, and what are the tasks for that group to do.
Okay, my next questions are in Department Progress Report. Administration Department, first one, support for funeral home outstanding charges. Is that issue, Nicola, where we finally got it so that they have to pay? Is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
we believe the matter has now been resolved.
My next question is under Clerk Division, continued initial planning of electronic filing system. What does that mean?
So we would like to have a centralized depository of all contracts and agreements that are signed by the city. Sometimes this might be done in a particular department, but there's not a central location for all of those things. So we have advice from legal counsel that we should keep hard copy of some documents, but there's other things that could be kept electronically to save some space and some paper. And so that's the project that we're working on.
Okay. My next one is continued, this is under you again. Continue work on promissory note proposals on issuance for 2023 CIP budget. Is that the correct year, 2023 or 2024?
Yes, I have to work in 3 years simultaneously. That is the correct year. So that was the promissory note that was adopted at the last meeting.
Last meeting,
Yes.
okay, I got it.
Yep.
Last one on that page is work on playground accounting and grant reimbursement.
Yes, so the Platteville Inclusive Playground Project was a CDBG project, as I think you know, which involves a lot of meeting of required compliance for the grant money. I'm thankful to say that the large majority of that work is being handled by Joe, but I do have some responsibility for the financial aspect. And so that is ongoing. That project is not final, and the project funding has not been closed out as of yet.
Okay, next page is under Finance Division, Finance Division annual evaluations. And my question is, of what? Of people or what?
Yes, so that would be
I'd
annual.
appreciate if you'd spell out a little more what you're going to evaluate.
I'll add the word performance or employee performance.
Is this a performance of people?
Yes,
Of people.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's it for this area. Okay, city manager question, continued discussions on the transfer of the library. Can you give us some information about the transfer of the library? What is taking place?
I had the opportunity to meet with the leaders of the partner group that owns it, with Mr. Alan Gents and with Julie and with Rob, I believe. We had an exchange on kind of bringing me up to speed on some of the history of what went into it. We talked lightly on several of the different kind of pressure points that we know exist with common areas that are going to have to be parceled out. And then kind of had the discussion on, we'll have to have our corporation counsel and their attorney is going to have to be involved in essentially putting together kind of a condo agreement of what it's going to look like in the future. But to kind of plan then from our end, we need to start thinking about the different elements that we would like to see incorporated in and heavily be relying on director with the library, Jesse, to help us kind of understand what some of those points might be.
Our next question is met with partners regarding workforce housing initiatives. What does that mean?
Talked with two folks, the city administrator of Boscobel, and then a gentleman whose name escapes me embarrassingly, a very educated gentleman that works at the University of Wisconsin in the business department with development, and was picking their brains on different workforce housing initiatives.
Next one is direct and implement the formal complaint and mismanagement policy along with providing training opportunities for staff. Delayed. Is this the thing we talked about quite some time ago as far as the employee handbook?
And
Or
it's
is it
not
something different?
not directly in the handbook, but it's the policy on formalized complaint. You'd come into my office and we had talked extensively on it. It's still sitting on my desk now, delayed with other projects on making the final kind of revisions to that and getting that implemented and educated with the staff and leaders.
Next one is continued action on the development of an event request process and donations policy.
I'm working with Candace in putting together a lengthy packet that helps us establish all the many expectations that go in with our events. It's quite amazing how many events that we have that are driven through volunteer and service groups, which are amazing. But trying to put a packet together to capture the many expectations so that we understand from our end what the different support is and it's needed for it. And they can understand on their end what different services can be provided or, meeting in the middle on things that we would need funding sources. So it is in the works.
Okay, a few questions for the library. On the buildings and grounds, it says here, due to faulty smoke detector in the hotel, began the process of evacuating on Saturday, July 29th. The library and hotel share a fire suppression system and smoke alarm monitoring, which requires frequent communication and troubleshooting between the director and hotel manager. So, what about what's going to happen now when the library gets separated, hopefully from the motel? What also happens as far as carbon monoxide, CO? Is CO measured also in the library and in the motel?
I can speak for the library. Yes, we do share fire suppression and the water, the fire suppression system, and those will never likely be physically separated out. That will continue to be a shared system. The library does do carbon monoxide monitoring. I'm not sure, I can't speak to the hotel on that. We do that internally.
And my next question pertains to is that Stickley and Morton Senior Project Architect Tammy Black. It says addition of a comfort room, additional study meeting rooms and a single occupancy restroom for the first floor. Now, is this going to be changing the usage of some of the rooms that are there already, or is this gonna be adding on, or what?
Question. So you may recall that in our 2023 CIP budget, the council approved funding for the addition of a lactation or comfort space within the library. As we started to explore that, we realized it would be wiser to make a long-range building plan to assess some of the other needs that we're seeing within our space, such as additional study rooms. So Tammy Black has been helping us kind of map out what those changes might need to be in the future. We don't anticipate ever expanding our square footage, but maybe reimagining the way some of our space is currently being used.
And the last one, I think, is on the hearing loop. Mike Meyer was able to replace a damaged hearing loop microphone on the first floor. And I'm curious as to how a hearing loop becomes damaged.
Sure. So it was a microphone. So as part of our inclusivity efforts, we make sure that we have hearing loops available at all of our service desks and within our community program space. And one of them just had a faulty wire that split and we had to replace the mic.
So it was not actually a damaged microphone, but it was
Damaged cord.
defective.
Sure, sure.
Okay. Okay, Howard Crowfoot. I'm looking at major objectives for the coming month. And I want to thank you for the work that has been done as far as Jenner Park. But we're looking at speed on Mineral Street. People are speeding on that street, so this is something that needs to be looked at. One-way traffic. Mineral Street is a one-way traffic street, but people are going both ways on the street. And we're looking at a crossing for the handicap. So a crossing for the handicap would need to be a CIP project. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So how can that come about? When does somebody come up and make a motion as far as getting at least $10,000 to help work on making a crossing for handicapped people for Jenner Park?
There are a number of things that could be done. One of them is during the budgeting process, if the council members desire to insert a project into this, that's your prerogative. However, I would hesitate to do that until we've had the full report by Southwest Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission regarding pedestrian and bike plan. My concern is that if we do a simple, quote unquote, $10,000 fix, that it will be not fully ADA compliant, and that we would have to spend money at some future point in time to make that crossing fully compliant because of the cross slopes of the street and everything else. And I'm trying to figure out what a more fully compliant crossing would entail, but it would be a lot more than $10,000.
So how
So
long will this take to get information on whether or not it can become ADA compliant?
I think that would be in conjunction with the Southwest Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission study that is being worked on right now.
Well, the situation is that the thing is needed now as far as crossing, and to wait more is just, you're holding up helping the people.
If I could interject, I think this would be a terrific topic for next Tuesday when we have our work session regarding budget. I think it would be a most appropriate venue for the questions in regards to that project.
Okay. And then, my last is for parks. Again, thank you for the removal of trees, two trees taken down. And the trimming of trees, and also some of the lights were repaired and 2 lights were not repaired. And so how soon will those be repaired?
Shannon actually did the lights that we repaired and found that the ballasts were, had to be removed. So we got 2 of the 3 that are actually working, and the interior part for the shelter. We do need to get the dusk to dawn part lit, because they're lit unfortunately all day. So we're working on that as well.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else with questions on the department progress reports? Okay, then we'll move into the action items on the agenda tonight. First is ordinance 23-09, amending parking in the downtown. Howard.
Thank you. We have 2 areas in the downtown that staff believes should be addressed. One is there is an on-street accessible parking stall on South Bonson Street, just north of the post office, by the second past location of the senior center. There's been a request to remove that accessible parking stall to open it up for general parking. And there are currently 2 accessible parking stalls in Lot 5 at Pine and Bonson behind the post office. Main Street program believes that these are sufficient for the demand in the area. And so we're basically requesting that accessible parking stall be removed and have the same restrictions as the other on-street parking stalls. The other location is there is a single parking stall on North Court Street next to Garvey's service station, the east side of North Court Street, that is not signed as no parking 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. We think it's likely included in the general signage, but staff believes a specific ordinance would be helpful, especially before winter when we need it for snow removal. So we're requesting that the council pass ordinance 2309 to do those 2 items.
Okay, questions of Howard? So do I hear a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 23-09 and ordinance amending parking in the downtown.
Again,
Okay, I have a motion by Todd and a second by Jason to approve ordinance 23-09. Candace will vote.
Arts,
yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper.
Yep.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
Yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next item on our action agenda is audit services for the year ending December 31, 2023. Nicola.
Thank you. The city has engaged with audit firm Johnson Block and Company for many years to perform various types of audits of the city's finances. Most recently, the city engaged with Johnson Block to perform the audits for the years 2018 through 2020, and then also for 2021 and then 2022. Due to the large amount of funding that has been coming down from the federal government and the state in 2020, 2021, and 22, the city was also required to undergo an audit to comply with Title II of the U.S. Code of Federal Regulations, Part 200, also known as the Uniform Guidance, and also to comply with the state single audit guidelines. And this audit is known as the single audit. Johnson Block has just completed the single audit for the year ending December 31st, 2022. Johnson Block was also engaged to assist the city with the submission of and support for the Public Service Commission conventional water rate case in 2021. Staff would like to engage with Johnson Block for the 2023 financial audit and single audit. With the transition to a new utility billing specialist and having a new city manager in 2023, along with the implementation of GASB Statement Number 87 on leases and GASB Statement Number 96 on subscription-based information technology arrangements, the timing and capacity for an RFP process and possibly for a new audit firm right now is not ideal. There's also a concern that due to a staffing shortage in the accounting industry, combined with the additional workloads from the new accounting standards and additional federal revenues, that auditing firms may not be taking on new clients. In fact, our audit partner, Brent Nelson, did let us know that Johnson Block is no longer accepting new audit clients. Staff are planning to request proposals from interested audit firms during 2024 for completion of the 24 through 26 audits. However, we are asking that the council approve engaging with Johnson Block for auditing services for this current calendar year ending December 31st, 2023. The audit cost of services is increasing. The increase represents approximately $11,000 on the low end of the range provided by Johnson Block. Part of that fund was actually not included in the last amount in the engagement letter. In other words, the work required for GASB 87 was billed separately. So the entire 11,000 is not all new funds. Some of that was expended in 2022, but not reflected in the engagement letter. However, it is significant that there is this increase, and it represents the staffing shortage as well as the additional workloads due to the new accounting standards.
Okay, questions, comments? So the range given by Johnson Block is 56,000 to 61,000 for our audit and single audit, which would actually be 2-year single audit. Is that what I'm
No,
hearing?
it would be 1 year of single audit, and then the regular financial audit. But it would include the work for GASB 87. But I believe the work for GASB 96 would be separately billed.
Hey, questions? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion. We approve engaging with Johnson Block for auditing services for the year ending December 31st, 2023.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Bob and a second by Kathy to approve engaging with Johnson Block for auditing services for the current year. Candace will vote.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
yes,
Doss,
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is the fire facility concept proposal. Clint.
Madam Chair, the Platteville City Manager and Platteville Fire Chief have met with the fire districts and townships. A presentation was given to the Common Council and the partner townships, which included a summary and the background of the history of the project, a review of the concept development, a review of the initial presentation given by our architect and construction manager, a concept options for consideration, and a layout of the decision points, including the costs. Townships have given their recommendations regarding the concept and the location. Feedback from our partner townships has been presented to the Common Council along with the recommendation from the city manager. It is intended that the Common Council will take action on a recommendation this evening. The impacts of this, again, are a spectrum. Right now, we're looking at the project of a single story with 6 bays at a location of the industrial park coming in around 12.5 to a 7-bay single story at OE Gray with expanded parcel at about $14.5 million project. The recommendation is recommend that the council to advance on a single story design and make a selection on the location tonight of OE Gray or the industrial park, and then the number of apparatus bays of 6 or 7. The presentation is queued up if you would like to see a review of the slides. In conjunction or in addition to the information that was presented last week, I would add that in talking with Brian, our municipal advisor, who also came in to give us our financial plan, the impacts that you would see on an annual tax rate over 20 years of borrowing for these two sums is at about a $3 million fire facility. It's going to add about 19 cents to the rate over that 20 years. To increase that up to a $4.5 million fire station, it's going to be another additional 10 cents. So you're looking at about 29 cents of impact on the rate over the 20 years. The capacity that we would have in engaging in this is with both of these and it being spread over 20 cent, we're going to be approximately at or below the 50% of our statutory limits. So we'll still have some capacity again there by statutory limits. Of course, that number does get smaller at our self-imposed 3.5%. And I can bring up the slides again if you would like, Madam President. Otherwise, I know that you do have a lot of folks that want to participate from the audience as well.
Actually, I only have a few who want to speak.
Okay.
So is there anybody on the council that wants to see the presentation again? I'm looking down. Todd, yes or not? You?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Lynn, you're okay? Ken?
I just have a question about this.
Well, just a minute. I'm going to figure out, first of all, if we're going to see the presentation. Bob? Jason? Kathy? And I don't. All right, Ken?
I'm looking at the recommendation from townships and it says plus, in parentheses, plus add 7th, and it says PACK. Is that a misspelling?
Yes, I believe that was supposed to be bay. Or the 7th apparatus bay is what the intent was there.
That's supposed to say? A bay?
It's the apparatus bay. It's the intent
Instead
there
of-
was a 7th of a 7th
Instead
bay.
of pack, it's supposed to say bay? Is that correct?
Yes, that
Shut-
column
okay.
indicator is for the 7th apparatus bay.
Okay, it said pack and I tried to figure out what pack meant. Thank you.
All right, does anybody have questions of Clint before I go on with the green sheets that I have received? Otherwise, I have several people who have. Let me get this down. I will start by saying I have the following. Deb Rice registering in favor of the OE Gray site. Peter Janish registering in favor of the Platteville Fire Station. Melissa Lovell registering in favor of the Platteville Fire Department at OE Gray. Barb Stockhausen registering in favor of the fire station at OE Gray. Paul Button registering in favor of the new fire station at OE Gray. Steve Strobel registering for the fire department building at OE Gray. Soraya Strobel registering for the fire department at the OE Gray location. Chris Budden registering for the fire station at the expanded OE Gray site. Sean Dillman registering for the OE Gray and extra property for the fire department in favor. Brad Dean, can't read your writing, registering for the fire department, OE Gray and extra property for the fire department. And John Fick registering for the fire station at OE Gray location and property. I have 3 people who have asked to speak. I will call first the person who will speak in favor. The second, I will call the person who's asked to speak against, and then I will ask for the person who's wants to speak only for information purposes. So Bill Closter has asked to speak in favor.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Bill Closter. I live at 975 Highbury Circle here in Platteville. And I'm registering in favor of the OE Gray expanded location with 7 bays and a basement. That facility will provide the necessary space for the fire department as recommended by the 5 Bugles study from February of 2021. None of the other sites will do that. And without the basement, it's only 90% of the recommended space. The city, in accordance with paragraph 24.15 of chapter 24 of the municipal code, requires the common council to appropriate funds for, but not limited to, department operations, apparatus, equipment, training, fire prevention, and any fire station/facilities for the department to perform its duties. The 2021 study has identified that the current station lacks necessary facilities to include adequate space for equipment, personal decontamination, training, equipment support, and ventilation. Platteville is very fortunate to have one of the highest rated volunteer departments. I cannot express the admiration and thanks these men and women deserve. Volunteering to risk their well-being and their lives to help save or render services to the members of this area. However, this level of commitment has been declining across the nation as the pool of volunteers willing to put this level of effort into their communities is declining. Several communities have been forced to consolidate and settle for increased response times. Platteville must prepare for the future and not be consumed by it. The fire station is a necessity and not an amenity. We must provide what is needed and not something that fits our budget. This is a very important step in keeping our communities safe. Please support our volunteers and build something we will all be proud of, not just check the box. And I'll leave you with one thing I used to tell my soldiers. We can do anything that we really want to do.
Okay, thank you, Bill. The next person I'm calling on is Jason Fiedler. He has registered to speak against, I guess. Jason? Well, it says, I would like to speak against. I would like to register in favor, and I would like to speak for information purposes only. You have 3 check marks. I don't actually know what you want to do. Pardon? Oh. Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Thank you, Jason. We'll say you did not really want to speak then. Okay, then we will go on to Dan Smith, who is asked to speak for information purposes.
Thank you. As Barb said, I'm Dan Smith. I'm one of the township supervisors for Platteville Township. And first of all, I want to thank Clint and Ryan for the presentation that they gave at the township. We appreciated that. We are in favor of the OE Gray location with the expanded portion. We did have one of our people that was in favor of the industrial site, so we were a little bit split, but we would support either one, but our recommendation is for the OE Gray. The night that we had the presentation, at the end of it, we were under the understanding, and I say we, it would be the town chair and both supervisors, that there would be another meeting of the, and I'll call it the fire district, which would be the city council and all of the township officers, which would be to make the final decision. And I guess my question is the city council making that final decision tonight? Or at some point in the future, will there be that joint meeting that we thought was going to happen so that it can be a true decision of the entire fire district?
I can speak on my understanding of the situation, Madam President. So we approached townships, as we talked about, with the scorecard and gathering their recommendations on the concept and location as presented to you folks and here for decision tonight. It's our intentions to come back through though with the different townships, because we're certainly not there yet. A concept and where we're going to put it is a pretty big hurdle, and we're going to start getting traction. But that is nowhere, from what I understand, the end of the game. There are many different decision points to arrive at yet. What we plan on coming back to townships with would be another, okay, now we've got an actual schematic designs and we've got bidded prices. This is what it looks like, and this is kind of the monies we're going to be asking for in a time of delivery, and having that conversation to affirm that we're all on base. So arriving at a concept and a location was to make sure that our partners understood kind of what direction that we're moving in and what it's going to look like, and to the best of our understanding, kind of what that ballpark range for cost is going to come in at. So if I expressed that the expectations was to have another type of a group meeting before that, that was not what I had in mind. I was anticipating a decision tonight. Doesn't mean that it can't be deferred, but I was hoping that the vote carried forward from the townships was sufficing in fulfilling that piece of feedback to the council for their decision.
Okay, Dan, and my understanding of what we would do tonight would be making a recommendation on going forward with a site and a location, an idea of how big, whether it's 1, 2, or whatever stories. But yes, there's still a lot to do, because a $14.5 million building is a lot different than a $12.5 million building, or as we started in the beginning, when we did this study, when we thought we were going to be able to build an $11 million building with everything we wanted. And we know that that's not possible now. So I think the next step is after the council, and it was pretty obvious that the recommendations from the townships, we have 7 townships and 6 recommended the OE Gray expanded site. So it appears that the majority of townships recommend that site versus other locations. So I guess I would to me, the questions tonight are the where.
The different elements would be the concept, if you're happy with the one story concept as appeared in the 2 different options at OE Gray and the industrial part, and what that looks like. The second piece then is location and footprint. Is it an OE Gray extended, or is it an industrial park? Doesn't necessarily mean the other ones are.
Or is it just OE Gray without extended?
Yes, but then the concept would have to change, but that was still an option that is out there, past recommendation, but it is an option that's there. And then the other one is, you know, what do you want to do with the added on features as brought back? The apparatus bay kind of base bid is seen as 6, adding a 7th bay, and then a basement as an add-on. Is that something that you're interested in as well? So there's kind of four different pieces.
So to me, the first P, Todd.
I have a motion if you're prepared.
Well, I assume we aren't quite prepared. Bob, questions? Any questions?
No questions.
Jason?
No.
Kathy?
Okay, so what we're going to, the action tonight is we are making a decision on location. Correct?
Location? Yes.
Concept about it being the 1-story expanded.
Would be
My concern,
okay.
my concern going forward is that the city of Platteville is one member of the fire district. So the comment from Platteville Township, to me, it would, if our purpose here is to lock in the site and move forward, I would really like to suggest that the fire district meet as a group. instead of, I mean, I would think it would save time instead of staff going to every town meeting and have the district work in unison so that everybody is on the same page and they're here. This is a tremendous amount of money. It's something that's not going to happen again in probably most of our lifetimes. And we just really want to make the right decision. But I would really like to see, and maybe the townships don't care about doing that, but you know, we have a chart showing the recommendations but I guess I would like to encourage a meeting of the entire fire district.
Just have a comment that reference that we sat here earlier this month and heard from the townships. We also represent 75% of the population, just us right here. 75% of the population within the entire fire district, or the majority. Now, I'm not saying the townships might not want to talk about this more, and that's fine. But for the purposes of making a decision for the 75% of the people we represent, we have a decision to make here. It's been a number of years now, and the price isn't going down. It's just going up. So I think we need to step forward. I think we need to step up and get a decision made. And I do have a motion when you're ready.
Okay, Lynn, you have a question?
No, I was just thinking the same thing, that I thought that we, and when the young man just got up, I think he gave like general agreement that what the township wanted. I mean, I just think we've been doing this a long time, and I think if we can start moving forward with some concealing some, locking in some steps, I think that's what we want to do.
Ken?
Well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm in favor of the OE Gray site. I do not favor industrial park. I do not favor the other site there. And so I favor OE Gray. Now, my first question is, what is the anticipated life of the fire station?
So with the borrowing, we're looking to do a 20-year GO bond. So that's kind of what you're trying to spread the life of a project over. In reality, with the last facility having a 60-year lifespan, I think it's appropriate that we would anticipate that a building, if put together right, maybe in a 50-year range, but that's certainly some magic 8-ball on not knowing how the city's going to change and many of the different features with firefighting and techniques and apparatuses and all those types of things. But me personally, I think that's maybe a goal. If you can get out to 50, that would be a pretty good accomplishment, but that's many variables that are going to go into that. And how you would anticipate those, I don't know.
And Clint, I think you mentioned something that's very important. And that is, I would suspect that when the current fire station was built, that nobody anticipated that there would be a 9-story tower built on campus and that we would need a truck with a ladder. I would anticipate that nobody would have thought about electric cars and the challenges that fire departments will have in the future in terms of fires with electric cars, to say nothing about the building materials and houses now that create issues that require decontamination facilities. I'm sure that if in 1960, when this current facility was built, if somebody had anticipated or even thought about the fact that there might be a need for decontamination, they would have included it. But we don't see the future. So we don't know so we're going to do the best we can.
I would say though, I mean, you are taking steps with that building of
Right.
incorporating 8 dormitories, which allow for the potential if we get in a situation where our demographics change and we have to go into a more of a paid on call type of a force and we need dormitory space, then that is available.
And a site is quite big.
Does have some opportunities there. You have to work with some topography issues, but it does have opportunities there.
They can.
Okay, my next question is, the amount of space that's needed to have space enough for paid staff and also for paid firemen. So I'm looking at the future that I believe in the future, we're gonna come to the point that we won't be able to get enough volunteers and we're gonna have to be having people right at the location. So how many spots do we need for these people to live at OE Gray? To be placed there. So that's the question I asked, so.
Sure. I'll take that one
The
for
fire
Clint.
chief,
So-
I wanted you to find out who around here has a paid fire department where the people live at the fire department. Does Verona have a paid fire department?
Verona has paid staff, yes.
And then Madison.
Paid
has-
on call. They're not necessarily full-time, but they are paid on call. They do pay their staff when they do
Right.
respond to calls.
Do they stay at the fire station?
They have dormitory capabilities, so they have that option to stay there if they choose to, but they're not necessarily required to stay in those dorms.
But they could stay there.
Correct.
Okay, now the city of Madison, what does city of Madison have? The city of Madison, 250,000 population. Do they, at their fire stations, have paid staff
Yes,
at their locations?
they're 100% paid staff, like
100% paid
15
staff.
stations throughout the city. All have dormitories and housing. They run 24, 48-hour shifts.
On the one hand, you would think that Madison would have enough people volunteering for a job as a fireman. So why aren't enough not volunteering in Madison? What do you think the factor
So,
is there?
If you
What is
had
the-
a,
What's the factor in Verona?
so if you were employed or were an employer and they had, say, 300 calls in the city a day, would you allow your employees to leave for 6 to 8 hours out of a shift? They can't. So that's the reason why you don't. There's enough call volume that there's no way a volunteer would be able to.
Yeah,
The
but,
only time they could volunteer would be maybe on a day off, but
but looking at the
otherwise-
future, there's enough people who have jobs, and so you may have to go out sometime during the night and go off your job, and or else you come back in the morning tired out and go back to your job.
yeah, the
No,
the
I-
concept of volunteering saves communities a lot of money, but when you get to a certain size, that kind of model completely changes.
And so what is that size?
It varies. There's no
What-
set number. I know communities that have 5,000 people that have full-time staff departments. I know departments that have, or communities that have 100,000 plus people that still have volunteer departments. So each community sets that based on the demands and the needs of the community. So as long as we can support volunteers, there's no need for those other models. I'm not saying that that's never going to happen, but there's lots of different models in the fire service to look at, from volunteers to paid on call to paid on premise to full-time. And then most of them are all going to still be augmented by some sort of volunteer or paid on call staff, because a paid staff for the city of Platteville this size that, if you were running 5 staff 24/7 is going to probably be 18 to 20 firefighters at a cost of probably $1.8 million just in staffing to the city of Platteville. That's a hard chunk to change to swallow for taxpayers. And that's only 5 people. NFPA requires us to have 10 people at a structure fire within 10 minutes. You can't do that if you want to meet that full NFPA requirement with all paid staff, then you're paying 10 people all times. That's a huge number of firefighters, which you'd never be able to afford that. So you're still going to have to augment it with paid on call volunteers or some sort of model as well with it. So even just a straight paid staff is not going to support the city of Platteville.
Well, I'm in favor of having a basement I think it's looking at the future and having the space. And I think that not having a basement is, to me, too short-sighted as far as looking at the future. As far as, you talk about buildings in Platteville, Pioneer Tower, I'll just give my personal experience. I had an office on 808 Pioneer Tower. I used to be more working with the fire department, so when they were looking at buying a ladder, they gave me a ride up the tower, up the ladder, to go up, which could go up 8 floors. So it's a matter that the fire facility we have is too low. In other words, we had equipment built that was too tall, or put it another way, our building was too short, and so we had to keep on raising stuff up. So I favor the basement. I think that's looking at the future. And I think we shouldn't be this shortchanging this and saying it's too expensive, we can't afford it. So in the future, I think we'll look at that and say, if we don't go to a basement, we didn't do enough. That's what I have to say for now.
Okay, any other questions? Any other comments?
So I would agree with Todd and Lynn that we've met a lot. And city manager and the fire chief went to all of the townships and got the opinions and perspectives from the various townships. And they're pretty clear on what people wanted and want to have. And, in a perfect world, it would be great to be able to spend whatever we wanted and have a basement. I like that, but I also know that all of the townships were opposed to that. I think 6 of the 7 were recommending OE Gray and the other was in support of OE Gray. No one was opposed to it. As far as the cost, well, I guess as far as what the fire station without the basement fulfills, Bill, you had mentioned the equipment, the ventilation, the decontamination, the equipment support, and I think it would fulfill all of that. The basement for an additional $2.5 million and another 750 to finish the basement. Is that
I believe that 2.6 included finishing.
finishing?
Yeah.
Okay, so about 2 million without finishing, 2.6 or so with finishing. But at the last meeting, I was thinking you were saying even without the basement, it fulfilled all of the needs. The basement was almost more of a community room, or it was going to be used as a community room.
It would be for future capabilities, storage, classrooms, any other type of future, so planning for the future use.
But I guess whatever the decision is, I kind of feel like it needs to be made. I think the township has already expressed their views.
I agree that we need to pick a site and we need to move forward. There are some people who say we've been trying to do this for 8 years and or 10 years or 20 years. Getting a $7 million appropriation puts us in a position where we can make a decision. Without that 7 million, we wouldn't even be having a discussion, I'm afraid. It just wouldn't be a possibility. So I certainly, I favor the OE Gray expanded site too. So Todd, you have a motion you want to offer? Okay,
If I understand this, we have the $7 million and the communities are.
if it's a $14.5 million facility, we have 7. The fire district is responsible for the other 7.5 million.
But that was including what we were guessing we would get as far as donation.
That's 7.5
Million.
that 7.5 million would be decreased
Mhm.
by whatever we get in donations. But we would have to everybody would have to be prepared to pay what it takes to get to 14.5 million. So that if we got no fundraising, the Platteville bill would be just under 6 million. And the townships would go up also. So the question will be, how much can we get in fundraising? And whatever we get in fundraising would decrease the 7.5 million that would be part of the 14.5. And the 14.5 does not include the basement. The 14.5 would go up another 2.6 to 17.1.
Actually, we were kind of estimating we would get 1.5 million in donations.
We were
but
hoping
that
for
was also
1.5.
Assuming we would possibly available anymore.
So there are a couple of things that we had hoped that we could do that aren't even available. One of the things we had hoped for was a 40-year loan through USDA. We cannot take a 40-year loan. Well, we could. We could take the 40-year loan if we gave up the $7 million. So our option is you can take the 40-year loan and borrow it all, or you can keep the 7 and only borrow for 20 years. So that was one item that was removed. We had hoped to be able to qualify for a community development block grant for public facilities that would probably have yielded about $500,000. We are not eligible for that grant because of the income levels of the people who live throughout our fire district. So we have so that we're not eligible for that. We have been working on other grant opportunities, and we have found out that some of the granting agencies that we had worked with before are not making grants this year because they have building projects of their own or whatever. So yes, anybody who knows of people, I mean, to get a $1.5 million fundraising, we're going to have a couple of $250,000 gifts. 250, maybe $500,000 gift would help. So it's going to take some mighty big gifts in order to get. We won't be doing 1.5 million with bake sales.
6 million that the fire districts were expecting to pay for the 14.5 million fire station with the expanded lot could possibly go up a little bit.
Right. Right. And I think that's the conversation we have to have when we choose a site. I mean, I feel pretty confident that the fire district supports the OE Gray site, the expanded site. I feel pretty confident that they don't support a basement at additional expense. I mean, that's what their recommendations were. Todd?
Right, before you all confuse me, let me get started. My motion's based off of specifically asking the fire chief what he and his people wanted, as they're the people taking the risk, and also the city manager's recommendations. Recommend the common council moves forward with the concept of the single-story building without a basement at the expanded OE Gray area with a 7th bay at an estimated cost of approximately 14.5 million, and that the city manager and fire chief inform the townships of such action and thank them for their continued support in this project.
Second.
A second.
Okay, Todd made the motion. I heard 2 or 3 seconds. Jason and Lynn, I think, is who I heard second. Candace will vote.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
No,
Doss,
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, and thank you all for attending, and never let it be said that this council doesn't want a fire facility. This council is just trying to figure out how to get there. And I guess, Dan, you can be assured that we will be now calling a meeting of townships of the fire district. Same thing, Angie. Thank you for coming. I don't know if we had any other township reps here, but I see Angie from Ellenboro and Dan from Platteville. So thank you all for coming.
Comment before anybody leaves. I think we'd be remiss in not acknowledging the tremendous group of volunteers out here. we have gone into this with you as our priority. And it has taken time. It's time to move and get this done. But thank you, one and all members of the volunteer department. You are the best of the best. Appreciate you, and we hope that as we move forward, you're going to get everything that we can possibly get for you.
Okay, we have a couple of information items on our agenda tonight. The first of those is the resolution authorizing the city manager to submit applications to the Wisconsin Department of Transportation for the 2024-2028 TAP program, Transportation Alternatives Program. Howard.
Hi, please forgive the errors in the sheet here. What we're looking at is in accordance with the capital improvement plan that was approved by the council. Our plan and hope is to get DOT TAP funding for phases 2 and 3, because we already have the funding for phase 1. Look at phase 2 for 2026 and phase 3 for 2028 of the Roundtree Branch Trail project. We're doing that to one, to space them out, and two, to coincide with DNR grants like we got for phase 1, so that we can get the vast majority of the trail projects funded by the combined grants. So I apologize for any confusion in here, but what this would do, I will correct it for next time for bringing it back. We're looking at 2 phases. It'll be phase 2 and phase 3. And what that would do is at the 2026 and 2028 cycles in our DOT planning, we would do those other 2 phases that would get us a trail all the way up to the Prairie View subdivision, Fairfield Drive, up on the north end of the high school. It would not include replacing that footbridge at Mound View Park yet. But that's the intent. Like I said, in accordance with what was in the project plan. The TAP grants are due October 27th. Technically, we don't have to have the resolution prior to that, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware that you continue to support the trail projects before I spend a lot of time and effort. And our grant writer, Angie Wright, spends a lot of time and effort making those grants.
So questions. I know that this is the trail, the Mound View Trail connector around Mound View, and then going from Broadway Street to the location next to the Prairie View Park where they play soccer. Howard, I do have a question. Is it required that we submit these grants so that they are lit?
No.
What would be the difference in costing if they weren't lit?
I would have to look. We do get some additional points on the scoring for having it lit, so that there's pluses and minuses to it. At the next meeting, I can explain what the difference would be for phase for phases 2 and 3, whether they're lit or not lit.
So Bob, is the Mound View Park walking path lit?
No, only on the front portion.
Just up by the,
Yeah.
yeah, but basically that walking path is not lit.
Yeah.
I mean, and I, okay, any other questions?
Is there a specific reason why it isn't? I mean, is it because maybe of not being?
Not that I know. I'm sure it's cost, but. I mean, it's basically used in the summer when if you go for a walk, it's,
Well, I mean, it's
Dusk is
used all
gone and-
winter. I mean,
Oh,
it's
sure.
plowed.
but you
The
know,
Mound View Park Trail is
Right.
plowed in the winter, so
Yeah.
you can walk in Mound View in the winter.
oh, I meant dusk and dawn.
Right.
So when the lights would be required.
Todd?
Withhold what I was gonna say. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Yeah, I would like to see the cost comparison because
Okay.
I mean, I think it's great. We have a lit walking trail from, 3.5 miles or whatever. I'm not sure we need 7 miles. Maybe I'm wrong.
I think I would agree. I don't know how many people actually use it at night. I mean,
All that trail, I mean,
no,
yeah.
I work on the trail quite a bit. And most of the people who are using a 7 and 9. And then there's some people who use it after work.
Right.
Like
And-
5 o'clock.
And,
The other consideration with that is future maintenance. It's not,
well,
it's not lit.
right.
And the lit trail at night is, I mean, if you go late at night, it's creepy to start with, so there's not a lot of people out there. I hate to say it, but
It's creepy.
just the nature of the lighting, just being where it's at, you're in a cone of light, you can't see out. It's got its own potential issues, so.
So, yeah, I
Plus the ecological impact of having the light out in the wilderness area at night, I guess. Thank you. So.
Okay, that's, if there's no more questions about the trail thing, then we'll move on to the city manager's presentation of the 2024 operating budget, which I believe is going to be on our screens or on the screen.
Thank you, Madam President. The 2024 city manager draft budget. And the intentions here tonight are to kind of roll this out with the expectations that the city council is going to meet next Tuesday in the police department training room to kind of get into the more intimate details regarding the different aspects of the budget. And the clicker would work if I turned it on. The quote for the budget that I've selected for recommendation again is, as we express gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. JFK and his Thanksgiving Day proclamation, 1963. A recap of our budget timeline. We're already, if you can believe it, at October 10th. We're quickly approaching the bottom of our schedule here. The content that we're going to go through tonight is we're going to review some basics of budgeting, so essentially some 101. We'll go through the 2024 budget proposal at a very high level. We'll then kind of dig down to the next level and get into some of the major initiatives in the CIP recap from previous conversation with a few adjustments to it. And then we're going to talk on the 2024 impacts and summary of what it all means and what the purpose of it is. So as a basic kind of refresher, the city must create a budget where revenue equals expenditures. So view it on a kind of a balance there. You've got revenues in the case of borrowing, state aid, fees, taxes, additional ones that might fit on there in a given year, as different federal aids, ARPA funds, those types of things. Expenditures have to balance, and that's your operating expenses, your CIP, your capital improvement plan spendings, debt service payments, most often for those CIP type of projects. And then you may have your tax incremental district shortfalls as a consideration, as well as many others, but the main premise is that it has to be balanced. The different expenditure type items, again, you have your operating budget, CIP, debt service, and TID districts. That is your operation budget is your cost to run your day-to-day operations. Your CIP are those one-time costs for large capital investments and items. Some items are predictable, others are not. Your debt service is the repayment on your loans, which are used for fund expenses for, again, those long-lasting capital projects like a fire facility. And then your TID district is if you have revenues that are less than the expenses, if you've got shortfalls when that TID district closes, then the city is liable for levy investment to make that TID district whole. Operating revenues, some of the rules that we talk about with operating is one-time revenue should not be used to balance the operating budget, a conversation that you probably had many times as we had the ARPA years and the pandemic, where if you have a big influx of one-time cash, it is wise not to try to put reoccurring expenses onto that. Two options to balance the budget essentially comes down to increase in revenues. You're going to bring more funds in, or you're going to decrease your expenditures. And the personal equivalent to this is your monthly pay must cover your ongoing personal expenses. We all have utilities, foods, insurances, mortgages, all those kind of things to pay. Using a one-time revenue using one-time revenues to balance your budget is like winning a $500 lottery and leasing a car with a monthly payment of $500. You can cover the expenses for 1 month, but you'll not be able to cover the expenses the next month unless you win the lottery again. When we talk about debt service, the city borrows money to pay large, long life capital projects such as streets. The length of the project should not exceed beyond the useful life of the item for which the funds were borrowed. Payments on the loan represent the city's debt service. Caps on the amount of the city can borrow exist. There's the 5%, the state level, the 5% of the equalized value. And then as we've talked about, we have our own 3.5% of equalized value, which is established through city policy. The personal equivalent on this is when you take out a mortgage or a car loan, you make monthly payments until the debt is paid off. The city borrowing, some of the different notes or the different numbers here is in looking at 2023, your equalized value was roughly 865 million and change. So the state borrowing limit of that is 5%. So we operate at a levy limit or a ceiling of roughly 43 million. The principal and outstanding in 2023 is at an 18.5 mark or so. So we're operating at about 43% of our legal capacity in 2023. The city debt limit policy is at 3.5%. So the city policy limit on that same amount of the 865 million times that by 3.5%. puts us at a limit of about $30 million ceiling to operate underneath our own internal policy. And in context of having that same amount out against the 3.5% is we're operating at about 61% of our, again, our self-imposed limit, which is, again, not a bad idea. And it does help us with having controls in place. So when we do want to go out to borrow, it helps us with rating and interest rates and those types of things. CIP funding, some of the CIP funding sources, and again, this is for capital improvement planning. Transfer from the general fund is one type of a method, and this is essentially a personal equivalent to this is you're able to save money from your paycheck in previous years, and you use it to pay for your new roof or your riding lawnmower. If we do a carryover from a previous year or like a general fund balance applied forward, you plan to purchase a riding lawnmower this year, but you didn't find the right one. So you're using the unspent checking balance to pay for the riding lawnmower in the next year. If you're exercising short-term borrowing, not typical and a sign of financial stress, you're visiting a short-term lender to pay for your new roof or your riding lawnmower, typically associated with a lower, higher interest rates. And you can engage in things as short-term notes as a year return where you're putting all your principal and interest on the next tax roll. Base reserves may impact your bond rating. And essentially the equivalent of that is you maintain a $1,000 balance in your savings account to cover emergency expenses. You as part of the $1,000 pay for your new roof and riding lawnmower. The long-term borrowing used for streets and some buildings like your GO bonds, you're taking out a loan for a higher cost expense that is expected to last a long time, such as a house. Improvement important to have in your income if you budget to cover for that loan payment. So that kind of impacts then your debt service. You're factoring in your annual budget to pay the debt on those. CIP funding in 2024, the CIP needs, the city conservatively has about $500,000 of reserves available to spend on CIP items with maintaining a responsible usage of assigned fund balance. $300,000 of levy expenditures has been incorporated into our non-debt funding for CIP. And we talked a little about this last meeting with Brian, and this reflects an increase of $200,000 over the 2023 CIP levy for such items as vehicle replacement, equipment replacement, building repairs, park improvements, and sidewalk repairs. In addition, the city borrows about $1 to $2 million for street reconstruction, annually. Under the current long-term financial plan, the city has limited this borrowing to the amount of the retired funds for each year. In 2023, the anticipated principal paid off for levy support financial borrowing was $1,355,000. The proposal for 2024 budget is to exceed this practice of the amount retired for each year. And the borrowing, and to borrow no less than essentially $4,454,544. And this is on account of the increased supplement revenues that we had come in, as well as then it also is accounting for a fire facility project. And this number here is actually going to creep up because this is a number used with a $3 million borrow for the city, and we're going to be probably in the range of about a 4.5. So this will be some modified numbers. When we talk about our TID districts, your tax increment finance districts are separate funds that have their own revenues and their own expenses. If revenues exceed expenses, the amount goes into the fund balance for the district as a savings for future expenses. The tax increment finance district may close early and can be, and the created tax base is added to the rest of the city, as it's also then added to the school district, tech school, et cetera, county. If expenses exceed revenues and there isn't fund balance or savings, then the general fund must cover that shortfall on closure. So this personal and equivalent is, imagine that you own several small businesses. If your revenues exceed expenses, you reinvest the money into your business. Down the road, you will see the business increase and make a profit. If the businesses can't pay their expenses, then you, the city as the owner, must pay for your personal accounts. Okay, so that's kind of the review, the big kind of pieces that we're talking about here tonight, as well as we'll talk about next Tuesday and as we finish up the budget process. Now, from the sky high view, this is the 2024 budget proposal. You're looking at on the left here, the 2023 general fund revenues, and this is just breaking it into the general fund, compared with the 2024 general fund revenues. The graph there is kind of put out at the bottom to show the differences in numbers, and you can see the small fluctuations kind of in the pie slices. To zoom in on, if you're looking at the major increases to the intergovernmental types of revenues, you're seeing it tick up from a 43% to a 47%. And this accounts kind of from that supplemental shared revenue. When you're looking at some, the other column, you'll see some, where is it here? The other, nope, also in there, you're also accounting for the interest income. And there's also considerations for county library as well that is coming into that. Looking at the differences for the general fund expenditures, what's going out of your general fund. Again, we're comparing the two different big pies again, the big picture, you're at 2023 versus 2024. You're noticing advance the slide. Thank you. Different pizza. Orange one. There we go. You're noticing some significant increase, or about the same types of numbers here. The pies are kind of about lined up. The significant changes that you're seeing on the right, though, if you zoom in on the actual numbers, you're seeing 82,000 change for general government, a public safety increase of 216,000, et cetera. So we'll get into the details of the actual increases of revenues and decreases in 10,000 amounts here in a second. But essentially, the big impacts here you're seeing is the wage study, collective bargaining, and health insurance impacts. The one kind of outlier there that you're seeing in the reduction in health and human services actually is from the Freudenreich, am I saying that correctly? Freudenreich Fund and the Humane Society kind of coming off the docket. Looking at the total then, looking for our expenses against all the funds, you'll see our two different pies again from 2023 to 2024. And you're seeing again some of the big impacts here. This is incorporating some CIP increases and fire facility with water support. I'm sorry, with
Did you?
water and sewer. Oh, slide again. Thank you. Oh, man, that'd be great. Here, I'm gonna hand you the clicker. So you're seeing the changes in capital improvements, an increase there, and that's accounting for the, again, the additions of those projects that we talked about with CIP. You're seeing, again, growth on all the different, the pie itself are getting bigger with some slight adjustments in the actual percentage. So what do these big pies really mean? Well, let's kind of start diving into them. So the big drivers that are impacting the different pieces, your big expense drivers are salaries and wages, your benefits, different mandates that might be coming down the pipe, as well as elections and contracts. Those are kind of the big expense drivers. In context of revenues, you're looking at different changes in state aids, hotel tax, revenues related to the new developments. And then you have some other ones that can impact you, as well as debt service and our conversations regarding that, TID support, and expenditure restraint. So some of the major initiatives in talking on that wage concept, this kind of puts some statistical data in complement to what we had talked about with our Carlson-Detman study. So this is an overview of the increases that have went in place. The chart here shows the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, based on the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It shows you the average increase in the month of December comparing back to the previous year. It reaches back to 2016, which I believe is when our compensation plan went into place. And it's showing the annual increase in that Consumer Price Index up through 2023. Number was used actually for September instead of September for the Bureau of Labor Statistics, because it's not, they don't project ahead. They just put in there what it actually was. So you're seeing an average increase of each year of about 3.38%, or a total of a 27% increase. And that is not compounded. That's just adding the percentages. So you'd have to also factor in a little bit for a compounding fact. Bringing it in a little bit more of a local view, the Consumer Price Index is reported through the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission. They get this number through the Wisconsin Department of Revenues. Same types of statistics. They're showing it across at essentially an average increase of about 2.96, or a cumulative of 23.65% increase over those years, again, not compounded. The city of Platteville and how we've addressed wages in the last, since 2016, you'll see the increases of the years that we gave there, as well as there has been some steps in the second year, but unfortunately, we've come in under that. We've averaged about a 1.63 increase over those courses of years, or again, a total of 13%. When Carlson-Detman was in here the other meeting ago, they suggested that we're about 18% behind market. You kind of factor in then maybe some compounding factors, and the sense that market with our positions might exactly not follow CPI increase. And it kind of looks to about the same narrative. And again, this isn't put up here to necessarily point fingers at, what were we thinking years ago? It's putting in context of, we probably should be inserting funds into our wages and compensation. So with that, the budget, we'll advance there. With that, the 2024 budget as an initiative for wage adjustments, the proposed implementation of an amended wage schedule results in an average of a 7% wage increase for all non-union city staff members, except city manager position. The schedule adjustment is intended to help address recruitment and retention challenges and to reflect our current market data. It has an impact on budgeted wages of approximately $224,600 for non-union employees. And that's levy and other expenditures that number doesn't reflect on the water and sewer budget. Essentially, every employee is guaranteed an increase of no less than 3% within that year of 2024. But do keep in mind, though, that there is the elements of incorporating the study means that some folks are going to get higher. Some folks might be closer to that 3% limit. And if you did your homework, then that's could be grapes and cucumbers for some folks on how they assess that in the social comparison scheme. It also includes those some adjustments for longevity compression within those positions, moving folks on to a new schedule. We've tried to accommodate for those situations where you have two employees and perhaps someone's been here 10 years, 5 years, somebody's new. Can we try to stretch it out and maybe put a step in between there to try to reflect some of that longevity? It's not going to impact on everybody, but again, it's trying to hit those pressure points. The Wisconsin Professional Police Association, our union folks, employees, are proposed to see an average wage increase of 7.5%. This will be an impact of approximately 64,500 in wages on the PD budget at the beginning of the year. The city manager intends to approve additional staffing and wage allocations in the amount of $90,710 for the 2024 budget. And this kind of is outside of the wage study, which we'll get into here now. So this very busy matrix here, the bottom dollar is brought forward from departments is about $492,000 of requested either staff increases or different considerations for reclassifications and value added and adding more expectations or reappropriations of funds or some combination. I'll give you a minute just to kind of run your eyes across it, and I'll give you a small respite from my nasally voice. So with all these requests out there, you can see the different reasonings behind them, and this is a very brevity to these reasonings. It's not to certainly not intended to underappreciate the needs and the wants with these positions, but it's put in here for brevity's sake. The recommendation with the budget as drafted is to essentially approve these 5 requests and increased overtime for payments for the police officers. A lot of this increase is in overtime is experienced with the current shortage. They're operating at right now at 20 positions versus 21, a position that was moved, I think last year or the budget before. And then we did increase some paid time off benefits, which puts more people out of the seat, which in a 24/7 means that you need overtime to essentially be filling those seats. There is an opportunity for a full-time firefighter through a FEMA grant, which would come in as a cost neutral if awarded. A recognition for Parks and Recs of moving the higher allocation of the office assistant to an apportionment essentially of 90% of the time allocated towards Parks and Rec in the Broski Center. Senior Center is a reallocation of a portion to driver budget to custodial, essentially with OE Gray shutting down and decommissioned. There was a rent associated with that is no longer in place. That's kind of a revenue loss. We have custodial work that was done out there. We've kind of moved that custodial work now in-house to not only help with the senior center, but then also help with some of the hours and helping Shannon and Gary with custodial services in here and supporting that operation in its entirety. And then moving the pool lifeguards up to $15 an hour. We're hoping to offset this with increased pool fees. The next major initiative tonight, as we like to talk about, is the Broski Center. If we can advance. So the Broski Center included a portioned expenditures. The 2024 budget is going to reflect the identified and allocated costs that were previously absorbed by other department budgets. The reallocation of these expenditures to the Broski Center Fund facilitates transparency on the actual expenses of owning and operating the Broski Center. The current budget calls for increases in revenue to offset these identified levy expenditures with a goal of reaching a zero or very limited levy impact in the next few years. But essentially through working through the departments, we've identified essentially $85,963 of staff time and other resources that are put into the Broski. The total expense increase was $90,465 or $463. We have proposals right now to increase the rent and the revenue essentially from utilizing that facility, as well as the anticipated volume of the rent. And we're hoping that in 2024 to have a expected levy support of $32,203, but working with the Broski Center Care Committee to assess those incremental fees and try to reach the goal of a self-supporting Broski Center. And then along that, you'll see the different hours right now that are identified and allocated towards operations on the Broski. Our next series of slides here is going to get into the major or the greater than 10,000 increases and decreases. The first here is the major general fund expense increases that are greater than 10,000. As talked about, we have an update to the compensation plan implementation of 224,000. The health insurance increase rates, which is a big number, but we're pleased with it. The initial quotes that came back were in the double-digit range. And working through our broker and our provider, we've gotten that down to, I think, we're at 5.9%. So a lot of good work from Chad Wilson and our broker in bringing those numbers down. WPPA union contract, again, looking at $64,500 increases in wages. Aquatic center wages, which we had talked about, but anticipating that we're going to have fees to help offset those. Police overtime wages, as we talked about. Election worker wages, we're anticipating $13,700 increase, and that is because we're hitting a general election, I think, and we have 3 or 4 on the docket.
Plus we have a presidential.
Yeah,
4, thank
Yeah.
you.
and we anticipate a lot more help needed for the presidential election.
We're hoping also then for increased in lead service line replacement, street department vehicle leases also increasing, garbage collection contract increasing, our IT support service contract increasing, and this was in context of the loss of Isaac, and we've renegotiated now a new contract with UW to still have that position farmed to us through the UW, but to have that wraparound support for bigger projects from the UW IT staff. Parks professional services, this is seen as an increase as well to try to potentially have contracted services to help with mowing and cleaning and those types of things to free up administrative hours for the office for coordinating and planning and handling programs. Recycling contract going up. Our community development professional services anticipated increase of 15,000. This is anticipated to be offset though with grant and in regards for the historic preservation. If a grant comes through, the expenditures would be there. If it does not, then we don't. Room tax allocation is an increased expense, but we're anticipating higher room taxes, and we share this with the Chamber of Commerce. So this is kind of an in and out expenditure increase. The city manager professional services of $10,000 increase. This is a holding spot to bring in strategic planning, which I'm hoping is a big element in how we shape our next future budgets and CIP planning for the next 5 years plus. And then a city manager contingency of $10,000 added to help in buffering any types of unforeseen expenditures and things that might arise. Our major general fund expense decreases greater than 10,000 is the OE Gray operating expenses of $54,821. As we go into operation revenue increases again for the revenue side of the house, these are the increases in 10,000 that we're anticipating with this budget. The state shared revenues. This is our county and municipality aid supplemental increases of $586,265. The interest revenue coming in from our from all of our fund balance that are in reserves is increased, obviously, as inflation has went up, so have interest rates. So now we are seeing a bigger return on our funds that we have invested. Taxi fares increasing of 85,000. Lead service line replacement. This is kind of the revenues that went in to complement the expenditures that you saw. Aquatic center admissions. This is the anticipated revenues again to that are viewed in covering the added expenses and increasing the lifeguards compensations. County library funding came through. Thank you, Jesse, for a lot of work in advocating and bringing in $38,000 more in library funds. General transportation aids increase in 20,000. Historic preservation grant. This is the in and out with the expenditures. The local room tax, you'll see a little bit more coming in here than is shared out with the chambers as we keep some of it. And then the state municipal service payment. This is the payment the state gives us for services that we provide by having the University of Wisconsin-Platteville in our jurisdictions. Major decreases that we're anticipating with revenues. It's the ARPA funding. We're going to reach the end of our designation window in 2024 and all expenditures, I believe, in 2025. We have the OE Gray rental revenue that is no longer there with the decommissioning of that building. The municipally owned utilities pilot, we're anticipating a reduction in that, and that is because of a formula impacts from prior year performances. I would be deferring to Howard to help or to be asking a friend if there's added questions on that one. And then we have the expenditure restraint incentive payment. We qualify yet for the expenditure restraint program, even though we are getting the supplemental aid. But because of how many folks now are qualifying it for this year, our apportionment coming back to the state is going to be of a lesser amount. Okay, you folks are doing very well. You're going to hit some sides here now that you are familiar with and recognized from last time. This is a review now on what is currently intended to be funded through the CIP CIP planning. This is a no change slide. You're going to see on top here the CIP projects, which are still intended to be funded and their funding sources. Give you a minute to just kind of run your eyes over it. Glazed, sleepy eyes. Couple changes here in Public Works. Okay, highlighted in the green here, working with the department. We've reconsidered and thought it might be a better idea to in fact do the aerial bucket and take leaf blower, wood chipper, and pavement cutter, which were initially intended for fundings, and defer those to future years. Likewise, moving into our recreation, culture, and entertainment here, the Rock School improvements has been switched with Hammer Robin improvements. Director Eric has identified that we might have more opportunities of getting grant, trust, and foundation fund for the Rock School improvements in 2024 than the other. And that was a recommended change, which we've incorporated. And then one change in the water and sewer utilities, the water meter replacement program, increasing that from 50,000, which was in there, to an increase of $150,000, and that's due to a major initiative to try to update some of our water meters, which we're meters and radios. Okay, so then we kind of start to get into the actual impacts and summary. So what does all this mean? It's a lot of pie charts and graphs and narratives. The very big boilerplate here is that in context of your levy, your general fund, the number for 2024 levy is going to be $3,870,000. And this is a change of a decrease from $3,409,000 in the previous year. You'll see the approximate change there, and it's a reduction of 9.4%. Taxi and bus fund, we're not anticipating levy because we're still using a fund balance that's in place to fund that yet for another year. But you're going to have to keep an eye on this one, because when that fund balance is expended, we're going to have to start putting levy into taxi and bus fund. The debt service fund, you'll see a small reduction in there again of levy fund that's going towards debt service projects. But that is because the line right below it, you're increasing your capital improvement fund directly from levy of $300,000 from $100,000 or $200,000 increase. Overall, the total levy is coming in at a $5,015,684, which is a reduction from the previous year of approximately $143,960, or a change of essentially minus 2.8%. The impacts of the assessed tax rate, this would bring the tax rate down from a 7.24 on your assessed value to a 7.04. Now, do keep in consideration that as assessed value on properties goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean that your whole tax bill is going to come down. It's just the assessed rate per thousand. Next slide, please. So with the adoption of Wisconsin Act 12, the city of Platteville became eligible to receive an annual supplemental county municipal aid, or CMA, revenue increase from the state of Wisconsin. This increase is anticipated to be $586,790.92 in 2024. The act calls for the use of this supplemental aid for law enforcement, fire protection, emergency medical services, emergency response communications, public works, courts, and transportation. The anticipated apportionment of this revenue will be spread over the 2024 budget, with increased expenditures in public safety and public works operating expenses of $389,126. It increased expenditures in public safety CIP of $96,000, an increased public works CIP of $214,000, $800. And those numbers don't add up towards 586,000, but those are the big chunks throughout the budget of increases for those things that qualify. So it's kind of all mixed into the soup, if you will. But those are the increases for sake of showing that we still have maintenance of effort. These are the added funds into it. A small note on OE Gray. So the 2024 budget calls for a $0 operation expense for OE Gray. Custodial expenses are transferred to City Hall maintenance, and the apportioned apportioned to assist the senior center as well as supporting other areas of the building. We're progressing with disconnects and winterization of the building in preparation for the possible demolition based on the vote tonight, the most likely demolition of that building. So what does this all mean? Well, essentially what it is proposed that the 2024 budget is going to do for us is it's going to begin to incrementally refine our compensation policy, supporting recruitment, retention, and quality of services. It incorporates the additional $586,000 and change of the supplemental CMA shared revenue. It brings transparency to the Brodsky Center operational expenses and begins to incrementally address these. It provides CIP capacity for the addition of a new fire facility. It adds $90,710 of additional staffing and wage allocations to police department, parks, rec, and pool, maintenance, and city hall and the senior center, and possibly adds a grant-funded firefighter. It acknowledges state efforts in providing local aid by holding the line on tax burden in 2024. What the proposed 2024 budget does not do, it does not make significant gains on our extended street maintenance life cycle. I think Howard mentioned that we're at roughly 100 years before every road is 100 years plus of every road actually being reconstructed and built from the bottom up. It does not fund all of our requested CIP needs brought forward. I think we shaved out about $1.8 million of needs. And it leaves many departments stretched thin in maintaining current service levels and current service qualities. And it limits many departments' ability to grow new services without the reduction of existing services. Many different positions that were asked are very much in the kind of the need program, or the need column, if you will. And it's based on, again, trying to maintain high quality of services or trying to meet the needs of the public and expanding those types of services. The proposed budget operates again with about a 2.5 or a 2.8% decrease in levy or a 20-cent reduction in the tax rate. And the question is, why less tax rate? Obviously, we have needs. And my answer to that would be appreciation. It was through bipartisan efforts that state legislators have provided local aid to help local governments and taxpayers. So to me, it seems responsible to take this year to kind of pause, appreciate that, and use the next year to kind of plan what we want to do with that little bit of a ceiling that we have. With that then, as stated here, we do plan. Let's take the next year to strategically plan by gathering community input, refining our CIP plan to financially feasible projection, and decide where we want to expand, hold, and decrease services. We've done a fine job at bringing a lot of CIP projects to the table, but as you saw kind of through our financial management plan, we kind of have them all pushed out 3 years, which makes a big swell. We visualize having a CIP plan that is kind of more to the tune of, these are the projects that we financially feel that we can afford in the next 5 years. These are the ones that are shelved opportunities. And maybe on the shelved opportunity list, though, we also have ones that, hey, this could come to the forefront if we have some type of grant or some other type of funding for it. Capacity for incremental adjustments. This budget allows folks room for growth and growth in the direction that you folks and through your constituents feel that we should be growing in. We know we have work to do on wages, roads, and many of our services. As a reminder, approximately $51,000 of increase in levy equates to about 1% impact in our tax rate. And then also now consideration for the fire facility and possible reconstruction of Adams Street, as we talked about last meeting. With going forward with an OE Gray site, we'll have conversations on Tuesday on what it may look like then to try to do we want to incorporate an Adams Street as another possibility, or address whatever other types of needs and such that we would want to put into a budget. So That is my presentation for you tonight, to kind of digest and simmer on. We'll hit a worker group session next Tuesday with these talking points and with some of these statistics and such, as well as then a little bit more of the detail on what all the departments have in mind and where some of the numbers are. Madam President.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm assuming that this will be updated before next week to reflect a $14.5 million and the increased amount that it's going to require from the city to borrow.
That would be most appropriate. Yes, ma'am.
I would assume that that's going to happen.
With the caveat that since the borrow will take place in 24, there won't actually be an impact on service until 2025.
And I spoke earlier today with Clint in terms of a look, see at whether we could allocate some funding in 2024 for demolition of OE Gray and for the potential site acquisition costs. I really don't, I really have concerns about decreasing a tax rate and then the next year having to bump it and people saying that we weren't very transparent with what was going on. It made it look really good. And then, so I really would hope that someone would consider site demolition and property acquisition for 2024's budget and whether we need to borrow more, and then update these slides to show. And frankly, I think we ought to be updating these slides to show the total impact of 4.5 if we don't get any fundraising at all, because somebody's got to pay the bill. And so we have to be prepared to pay the whole bill in case we get little or no money in fundraising. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how other people feel.
I just had one other JFK quote that I always liked, and that is that people get the government they deserve. So I'm gonna end it with that.
Okay. Kathy?
Are we going to get a hard copy of that before we meet on Tuesday? This was a lot to
Update it
take in
first,
and-
I would assume. Well, I don't think we want to put out this copy when we know it's now 14.5.
Gonna amend this and these different talking points to bring forward for the big concepts.
And then you'll have a hard copy of other budget information for us before the 7th, before next Tuesday. That will get distributed this week.
That would be the intent, to
Okay.
get the information out, because it will be a lot. I mean, just these are quite a bit to peruse through.
Okay, we went through this budget here. And where do you have in it childcare? Childcare, in other words, two people working in the family and they need care to take care of the children because they both have to work, and so the children are running free maybe from certain time of the day, 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and those are ideal times to get into trouble. So where in this budget now do you have anything as far as childcare?
I'd look forward to some ideas that you might have for us next Tuesday to try to solve that.
Another one is mental health. What do you have in the budget for mental health for people? A lot of people need help as far as mental health. So that is not. Another one is the homeless people. They do exist in Platteville. We have them. They're sleeping in cars. They're in different places. They're there. So where do we have something as far as homeless people? We just neglect them, send them off to a different place. Forget about them. They don't exist. So we're not getting funding for these items. That's 3 of them I can think of.
I would say in the realm of health and human services, sir, that there's probably many, many more. But we don't have a lot of those functions we haven't taken on with the city. Doesn't mean that the city can't, but it would have to prioritize that.
So, I think this budget, as far as what we're getting for funding, is lacking. The state is lacking in giving us enough funding for carrying out what we need. Short-sighted, whatever you want to call them. They have the money, but
I think we got elections coming up, 4 of them next year, so we can make a difference there with that issue.
this,
I said, we have 4 elections coming up in 2024. Perhaps it's time for a change then and people vote somebody else in. That would fix some of it.
that's right.
Okay, budget session next week on Tuesday in this room.
No, I think we plan on meeting in the police department,
Okay,
training room.
okay, at 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Okay,
Barb's question, are we gonna get something for?
Yes, yes, we'll try to revise these, Ricky Tick with informations regarding the fire department to the best of our knowledge. And put out the other types of materials for you folks to simmer on through the weekend and such. So you have a good formulated base for Tuesday's discussion. Hopefully yet this week.
okay,
I have a motion.
good.
I motion we adjourn.
Second,
Candace will vote.
Arts,
Yes.
Parrot,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Gates,
Yes.
Killian,
yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Cop.
Yes.
Motion carries.